And our first our first speaker is B. Alex, who's going to be speaking on the online pivot. And so B, why don't let's turn things over to you at this point.
Great. So I'm now going into presenter mode. Hopefully that works now.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, so thanks very much for inviting me to speak to this workshop. So the paper that I'm presenting is on the online pivot, lessons learned from teaching a text and data mining course in lockdown, enhancing online teaching with pair programming and digital badges. And we might win the longest title of the workshop, I think. But this work is co-authored with 3 other people, Clare, Llewellyn, Pawel, Orzechowski, and Maria Boutchkova. We are all in different schools at Edinburgh University. Clare and myself have done PhDs in informatics and I'm in literature, and Clare has moved to politics. Pawel and Maria are in the business school. And I'm a Chancellor's Fellow at the university. So the background to the course is, the course that I'm presenting on is really that we developed materials for carpentries, specifically for library carpentries, because it didn't already have a text and data mining course available. So we developed materials that are the basics of text analysis, sort of, reading documents and doing initial pre-processing steps, and then post-tagging and named entity recognition. And data carpentries is a very interesting format for in-person teaching. So we did a very small pilot doing that in 2019 with like 3 students only, and then we wanted to scale it up. And at that point, the pandemic happened. And so we were sort of thinking, okay, what we're going to do now. And so we decided, right, let's pivot to online. So we did a first big pilot with more than 20 students in June, and then another one in September. And so that's what I'm talking about today. So in the first pilot in June, the UK, so we were based in the UK, and it was, we were still in strict lockdown. We were just coming out. Everybody was in desperate need of social interactions. And so the course, actually a lot of people were really enthusiastic about the course who joined. It was internal to Edinburgh University, but people joined from different countries because some of the students had gone home. And a lot of students joined from the business school, but also from other schools in the College of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences. And well, there were 25 people. And one of the big features of the course was that we used pair programming for doing the actual hands-on programming exercises. And we collected a lot of feedback regularly throughout the course. And then for the second pilot in September, that was a week before teaching started properly, we did another one. And this time it was for external members as well as university people. And so we had people joining us from the Scottish government and some commercial companies. There were 30 people. It was a free course because we were still like in pilot mode. We wanted to collect feedback and see what people thought about the material. And pair programming was featured again because the previous participant really liked it. Again, we collected a lot of feedback, and we used something new, which was structuring the content in digital badges, and I'll talk about that later. So in terms of the tools that we used something called Learn. That's the Edinburgh University's virtual learning platform. Other universities will have similar things. So it contained all the instructions for the course and the videos and any links that we had to provide to the participants. We used Jupyter notebooks for the coding. And one interesting thing we did is we used the Edinburgh Notable service, which allows us to load these notebooks, and people can use it on any browser, on any operating system. So we avoided basically having to do this initial install on different operating systems, which was extremely helpful. Coding was done in Python, and we used NLTK and Spacey in terms of the actual text processing and analysis. In terms of the content, we had 3 days of teaching, and prior to the course starting, we asked people to do a very basic introduction to Python. So this was aimed at people who had never done any programming before. And we also had a bit of a setup video to tell people how to get started with notebooks and what badges were and how we sort of were planning of them working together in pairs and so on. And then we basically did a little summary about those two things that they had to do beforehand, because some people, just didn't do them. So we just went over the main points, and then we got into the actual meat of the course, which was how to load data collections, how to load documents, tokenizing them, doing all the pre-processing steps to be able to do, regular expression search, cleaning the data, visualizing it, doing counts, collocations, all this kind of stuff, all the way up to the entity recognition. And visualization played a big part in this as well, to be able to show the output in different ways. And the course was using two data sets. We used the inaugural speeches, which are provided via NLTK. And we also use the medical history of British India. It's a data set that is provided by Data Foundry by the National Library of Scotland, which is actually leading the way in digital, making digital collections available. So if you're looking for historical data collections and maps and images and that kind of thing, definitely a place to check out. In terms of the badges that I've mentioned already, so a badge is basically something that was, so the badge sort of method of using badges in teaching is something that was inspired by the Scouts. So it's, it's a fun thing to use for people when they learn something new, to basically assign them a badge. And so we basically structured our course content in these badges. And so each badge in our case contained like a mini lecture at the start covering like one of the text processing or named entity recognition sort of topics, and then we then split the participant into their pairs to do the actual hands-on coding, and there were many tasks at the end of each notebook for them to solve. And at the end, everybody came back together in a room, and we asked, we had a bit of time for discussion and feedback. So feedback was quite important. And then we built up the badges to construct a whole course. So we had several badges, as you had seen before. And what we didn't have in these pilots was assessment, but that's something that we're going to now include for this course going forward. So paired programming is something I already mentioned. So that's something that is used quite extensively in software engineering. So in like programmers kind of group themselves in pairs, and one takes the lead. And so you can see here on the left how this used to happen. So people would sit around a monitor, and one person would basically, discuss the code with their partner. Especially if there was an error, there's this concept of talking to the rubber duck. So the other person would just listen, and the idea is that as you're explaining what's wrong, what you're doing with the code, you might discover yourself where the error is. And of course, the other person can also help, because sometimes it's easier to spot when somebody else does something wrong than when you're doing it yourself. So we thought this would be quite good to use in our course, but doing it online. So we basically used these breakout rooms like you used yesterday in the workshop as well. And so we split people in pairs and then let them work through things together, or if they wanted to work through them separately, but just discuss things if there were an issue, that was also an option. And then in terms of feedback after each badge, we then asked them for like a minute, less than a minute, to fill in a form to give us feedback about what different aspects in the course, and also give us this thing that is done a lot in the UK, which is called 3 stars and a wish, where we said, like, give us 3 positive things that you liked about the course and something that you thought, we should do next time. So that's how we basically collected feedback in a fun way, and everybody really liked it. We used whiteboards sometimes to do it. You can see some screenshots here. And then the Microsoft Forms data we can then plot afterwards to see how things sort of varied across the day. And then we also did this ourselves, the teachers. We did so this is Clare and Pawel and myself. We did the 3 star and a wish ourselves after the first pilot. And it was quite interesting to see, especially by then, we were still quite stressed out about online teaching in June 2020. we realized that it's quite hard to pull this off on your own. Like, we were so glad that we had, our team to do this together. But, and we also realized actually doing this online is really hard. Like, it's really hard to witness the learning of the students. And so we really thought hard about how can we create like sort of a community where we get a bit of more of a feel of how people are doing and that kind of thing. So that's all flowed into the second pilot then. And you might have noticed there was a fourth author on the paper. So Maria, she was one of the participants, and she gave us extensive feedback, which we put into the paper. So if you're interested, you can have a look at that. She is a lecturer in the business school and used a lot of the methods that we used for her own teaching. So it's been great for us to see that that actually helped her. And just before I finish up, to say is that the course is actually now being accepted as an elective in a new institute, which is called the Edinburgh Futures Institute. It spans across different schools at the university, mostly in the humanities and social sciences, but also informatics. And it's going to be housed in the old hospital, which is right next to the kind of central university campus. And so it's very exciting. It's very interdisciplinary because it spans across so many schools, and our course will basically be part of this MSc called Governance Futures, which is led by Professor Laura Cram. And yeah, so it's really exciting. One thing we are now really working hard on is for this Edinburgh Futures Institute course is to how we do this in a hybrid way, because obviously the carpentries was all in person, then we went completely online, and the whole ethos of EFI is to deliver hybrid teaching. It's always been that way, even prior to the pandemic. And so I'm interested to hear if people have any advice on how to do this well, especially in terms of creating a community between the people who are kind of in the room and those who will join us online. I'd really happy to hear about that. Yeah, and there will, it will be slightly different organized with a project at the end where the students can learn, can show the techniques they've learned. Yeah, and that's the end of the talk. And thank you to the EFI and the Center for Data, Culture and Society who have supported this work and funded it. Thank you, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was terrific. Let's do our kind of virtual round of applause. And yeah, a very, I've been thinking, a few years from now, when people look back on this proceedings, I'm really glad we have your paper and a few others that do talk about this online pivot, because it's, really a kind of unprecedented thing and important to document what happened and how we managed. Are there questions? I don't think I see any in the Google Doc, which is fine. There is a raised hand. Manix, would you like to share your question?
Yes, I can. Thanks. Thanks, Ted, and thanks, Beatrice. It was a really nice presentation. I have a question just regarding the last thing that you were talking about. You were talking about that you guys are thinking on having this hybrid teaching methodology, and I'm curious to know about how that, because as I understand, hybrid teaching, it could be either that you could have like some people in presence in the lecture and then some others online, or either to do the classroom as a flipped classroom where you provide videos in a synchronous way and then students can follow the works at their own pace. May I ask, how are you thinking of this, if there's any decision about it, how you thought this hybrid approach?
So yeah, so basically the course works so the course is structured into like a pre-course part, a 2-day intensive and a post-course project, basically. And so the 2-day intensive is kind of the crucial thing, because everything else can be done kind of over a series of weeks. We are supposed to provide this, deliver this course for people in different time zones, people in the room and, people in the same time zone, but online. So it is quite a challenge. And so we are going to record as much as possible for those who can't join us like live. But the thing is, so for everybody who will join us live, still it's quite challenging because we will, two of us will be in the room and one will be joining on a computer to be able to support everybody who's joining online. And so we're currently thinking of how to do the pair work. For example, like, do we have only, people online only paired up with them, within their group, or do we mix and match with the people in the room? So at the moment, we know that we will have 16 people in the room because of social distancing just now, and then a number of people joining us online. And so, yeah, I mean, it's within the EFI, it's still considered a pilot. So we think we'll learn quite a lot in this first semester starting in September, and then we'll report back.
Yeah, that's exciting. I may follow on with to that question, if I may, about pair programming. And I have thought about pair programming off and on, and have been a little reluctant to explore it because and you mentioned it in the paper that how do you get the students to engage with each other instead of just working sort of side by side, or maybe the stronger person just takes over and says, I'm going to do this. I mean, how did you address those kinds of issues with pair programming, and what advice do you have?
Yeah, so when we first, I mean, in the first pilot, people hadn't really done online courses yet. It was sort of just all starting up. Everybody was really excited. Most of the people really liked the pair programming. Some really hated it. What we found quite useful is that we used Collaborate for this initially, and it might now also be supported by the other video platforms, but we could see when people were talking in their rooms. So we found that quite useful. So when the little icons were moving, we were like, okay, great, something is happening. And we would also then jump into the rooms after a little bit of time to, after they had a bit of time to kind of get used to it, to see how they were doing, to encourage the conversation if they weren't sort of talking to each other. But some people just didn't want to work in that way. So we didn't force them. So we left it kind of up to them to do it. But yeah, it worked well for quite a lot. So yeah, I recommend it.
Yeah. No, let's see, Verada, I believe you've raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So just related to that, did you also consider a little bit like bigger team sizes instead of pair programming, like maybe 3 people working together or 4 people working together? And
yeah,
what is better?
Yeah, we did it in the second run. We grouped, because there was slightly more students. I think we sort of, once we did pairs, and then we did so we had less groups to kind of jump through. We did like 3 or 4 people, I think, in the last day. So yeah, it was also useful. I think it was really useful for us also, because there were, if they had small problems that they could solve between them, then they would, and they wouldn't really need to ask us. If they were on their own, then, we would probably have to do a lot more hands-on help with like issues. So so they kind of learned from each other to some extent up to a point. And then, if that wasn't enough, then we would jump and help to fix other more serious things.
I see. But so was it more productive with 2 people compared to 3 or like bigger team sizes, or what was your experience?
I don't know. I think, I don't know if I can really say. I think it was good in both instances. So yeah.
Well, that's terrific. Well, thank you very much. This was really interesting. And let's thank our speaker again. And